Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazzo.
Hey friends, welcome. What a crazy week it's been, but our guest today, John Haller. We're going to jump right into what's going on over in Israel. We haven't gotten into a lot of specifics, and this is the program we're going to do that. Plus, we're going to talk about some historical information and some things you need to be aware of that a lot of people don't know because of the indoctrination and the propaganda that we've been fed as Americans through our media. But John is a lawyer, elder, teacher. He's known for his weekly prophecy updates, and he's a pastor of Fellowship Bible Chapel in Columbus, Ohio. And over on his YouTube channel, it is under fbcchapel.com. That's his YouTube channel, Fellowship Bible Chapel. Go look that up. John Haller, welcome back to Worldview Matters, brother.
Hi, David. Good to see you're making some progress on your show here.
Yeah, yeah. Progress. We're still here. People are supporting it, and it's growing little by little for a new show. So thank you. But brother, I just want to dive right into what we're hearing as far as the headlines. So many different outlets. Jerusalem Post. There's Tablet Magazine. There's Harbingers Daily. There's live updates over there. Israel at war. 1,300 plus Israelis killed. Nearly 8,000 Israelis are requesting firearm licenses due to the Hamas attack. Looks like there is proof now that children and babies were burned and or beheaded. There's so many gruesome headlines, John Haller, and we're just going to talk straight and just tell people, here's what we're seeing. If you haven't watched it or seen some of these headlines, a lot of people don't want to look at them. But the rocket fire continues. Israel is fighting back. Sometimes they're being blamed for responding or retaliating. We'll talk a little bit about that. But John, we could go on and on with the 81 families plus of hostages kidnapped by Hamas. They've been contacted by government so far. So much going on. We've got so little time. So I'll just throw it over to you. Your initial response to what happened.
Yeah,
and
so
then we need to go back and talk about some history.
Okay, yeah. So what I'd like to do is just sort of summarize a little bit about what's going on, what's happened, sort of set that up from a few weeks ago, then go back about 150 years, maybe 150 years to Israel and what happened. And because I think a lot of this fits into Bible prophecy, this is an incredible story. This is the story for our times. And I do believe that the world is literally on the verge of World War, if not in already, on the verge of World War III over this and the situation in Russia, Ukraine. That's also playing into this, and Taiwan and China and all these other hotspots around the world. Armenia, Azerbaijan, Armenia. I mean, it's absolutely insane. So let me give you context. So what happened, I woke up about 1 a.m. To get a drink of water on Saturday morning, October 7th. I did as I usually do. My wife yells at me for doing this. I looked at my phone. My phone was blowing up. I do speak a lot on Israel. I was invited last December to the Christian Media Summit by the Israeli government in Jerusalem. And one of the things they did during that was they took us down to Kibbutz Nirim, Nirim. It's probably the closest kibbutz to the Gaza border fence. So I've been in the communities and this community was attacked. I've seen pictures of people who were killed in the community, where a friend who was at the media summit was getting text from a lady as this terror attack was taking place in southern Israel on the morning in Israel, the morning of October 7th. It started about 6 a.m. in the morning. She was hiding out in her safe room and she could hear the terrorists roaming outside. Now, she has since been in communication that she was safe, but there were young people in that kibbutz. I know of at least one. I know there were others that were killed. As I said, it is the closest kibbutz to the Gaza border fence. So I have not slept much since then. There's a lot of things going around. There's a tremendous amount of propaganda. So here's what I think the best thing I can do is I like to state the facts. There have been over 1,300 Israelis confirmed dead. In Gaza, the air attacks, Israel has responded with devastating air attacks throughout the Gaza Strip. Gaza Strip is about a 20-mile long north to south and several miles wide east to west that sits on the Mediterranean in southwestern Israel. It is an independent country. Israel does, though, have a tremendous control over it because of the terrorism that takes place and emanates out of there, mainly through the governing party in Gaza, which is known as Hamas. It's very interesting, too, that Hamas has a biblical connection. If you go to some passages, for example, you go to Obadiah verse, I think it's 15:16, it says in English, the translation says, but for violence against your brother. Obadiah is a prophecy against Edom, the Edomites. The modern Palestinians trace their heritage to the Edomites. Edom was the son of Esau married a daughter of Ishmael. And in Genesis 36:9, it says, or 36:8, it says Esau is Edom. So there's this connection there, and there's a prophecy against Edom in Obadiah. And in the verse that says, for violence against your brothers, the pronunciation of the Hebrew word for violence there is Hamas.
Wow.
So I don't, in that, you can say that's a play on words. I think it's very significant. But there are 1,300 dead Israelis, 1,300 dead Palestinians within the Gaza Strip. But as this thing unfolded over time, it happened very quickly. I have spent a lot of time. There's a lot of controversy at how it unfolded. It started, the infiltrations of the terrorists started about 6 a.m. In the Gaza Strip. What they do is they have a vast network of tunnels. For example, at the kibbutz that I was, which would be in the southern part of Gaza, about 13 miles away from Gaza City, but it's flat plain land. You can see, you know how when you're out west, you can see an overpass 20 miles away. You can see Gaza City like it's right there because it's flat all the way. And then there's a fence. They've dug tunnels all the way up, even under the fence. At times they come up on the other side. And so when Israel goes in and bombs buildings, as they're trying to do, Israel refers to this as they have these rocket attacks on regular basis from Gaza. They attack and destroy rocket launching sites and that type of things. But these rocket launchers are very mobile. So it's a constant cat and mouse game to try to find these. They then get, the international community, these poor Gazans, they're suffering. We have to rebuild. So they send rebuilding materials in to Gaza. And many of the rebuilding materials are repurposed to construct these tunnels, vast network of tunnels. So what I suspect happened was these terrorists used the tunnels to come up near the border fence. They were able, with using RPGs and some of the rocket attacks that they've had in the past, the rockets have fallen short in the area of the fence. It's now thought that that was done intentionally to weaken the area of the fence. They were able to get a bulldozer through. Israel has, since this operation started, has killed 1,500 terrorists inside Israel in this small area in southern Israel.
Wow.
There are still some roaming at large. One of the things they did, they went in and they attacked Israeli bases in the area. They killed the soldiers in their sleep and took their uniforms. Then they went out into the communities dressed as IDF soldiers. They know from prior rocket attacks, everybody has a safe room that they head to. They went to the homes. They spoke Hebrew. They had learned Hebrew. They said, you're safe. We're the IDF. We're here to help you. The people came in, let them out, and they were slaughtered.
Wow.
Some of the scenes are absolutely horrific. I would encourage people to go and look. Now, there are a number of sites. Barry Weiss at the Free Press, she's a former New York Times writer, is documenting a lot of this. But even Benjamin Netanyahu's personal official Twitter account just posted a short time ago picture of a dead baby, a couple that had been burned while they were braced, I guess, and another. The pictures are inhuman. They're burning bodies. They're destroying people. In one kibbutz of about 700 people, they found about 250 bodies. There's a famous, now very viral, famous news report on I-24 News from Israel. And in that news report, the reporter says, talking to soldiers, that they had in that kibbutz 250 bodies out of 700 residents. And they, and I can't remember the name of it. It begins with a K. You can find it at I-24 News very easily. They found 40 toddlers and babies. Some of them had been beheaded. Now, a lot of people, there's a lot of controversy. So Mio says, well, there weren't 40 beheaded. Maybe it's only 2. The point is they murdered 40 children and toddlers, folks. Yep. That is the crime against humanity that these, I will use the term used by the Israeli Defense Minister, that these animals have done. So Prime Minister Netanyahu has come out and said there will not be a Hamas when this operation is over. We will systematically eradicate it. And this is an evil on the face of humanity, and it needs to be eradicated. Now, I know some Christians get very upset about that, but there are innocent people that need to be protected. So 1,500 terrorist bodies in southern Israel. There was one that was injured in the firefights as the Israeli Defense Force finally, they were slow to respond. Okay, this was, in many respects, there was an operational and tactical and intelligence failure on the part of the Israeli government and the Israeli Defense Force. There will be accountability for that. My personal opinion is that Prime Minister Netanyahu, when this is all over with, will probably take drummed out of office. The IDF has a lot to answer for, but also understand that this appears to be an Iranian-directed op. Now, our State Department, our government has come out in support of Israel. We have sent the Gerald Ford naval carrier battle group to the Eastern Mediterranean to assist. But our government did assist in the release of frozen funds that being held in South Korea that belong to Iran of $6 billion within the last few weeks. Part of that was the unfreezing was done so that we would have 6 hostages that Iran was holding in prisons in Iran released. I'm very concerned that, and I don't know the exact legal procedure, that the Biden administration has not done anything to try to refreeze that money. The Biden administration has sent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to the Palestinian Authority, which makes its way to Hamas, and this money is being used now in terror operations. Iran has funded this. The Biden administration came out, sorry if I'm talking fast, but there's a lot to cover. The Biden administration came out and said, well, we're not sure that Iran is involved, Secretary of State Tony Blinken said. I can take you to the Iranian Cayenne newspaper, which is an official mouthpiece of the Iranian government, and it says today, translated clearly by Middle East Media Research Institute, memory.org, we are the hands and brain and mind of the operation that took place in Hamas. That's from the Iranians' own thing. We know they fund Hamas to the tune of, I think, $100 million last year. We know that they're funding Hezbollah in the north, in Lebanon, and in Syria. And they are developing, the Iranians have been for years developing proxies throughout the northern region there. They've also been funding terror operations and cells in what we call the West Bank. This would be the area of Samaria, biblical area of Samaria, north of Jerusalem, in the mountainous region of the central spine of Israel, and the area of Judea, biblical Judea, in south of Jerusalem, like down to Hebron and Beersheba. So that's the West Bank comprises those areas. So Israel, because of that unrest there and a lot of concern of the security situation there, had shifted troops up. It was a holiday. It was the end of the feast days and the fall feast days in Israel. It was a Shabbat, and it bears very, very close resemblance to what happened 50 years ago to the day when on Yom Kippur, a feast holy day in Israel, a special Shabbat, when people would have been home with their families, everything closed down. Egypt and Syria attacked Israel in the famous Yom Kippur War. Israel eventually was able to turn that war around. Ariel Sharon did a very famous tank battle where if he had not been stopped, he would have taken over Cairo. But in the initial stages of that war, Israel was so unprepared. It was a complete intel tactical failure, much like I think we saw here, but very clever operation. But in the 73 Yom Kippur War, very interesting story. Egypt and Syria had so much success early on. They were moving so far into Israeli territory that they withdrew because they thought it was a trap. And it wasn't a trap. And I think the Lord blinded their eyes. So you're going to have to keep me posted on how much time we have left. So
John, we decided to skip our break because we just want to keep going here. And we're going to do a part 2 with John Haller on Monday. So just so you know, we're going to run out of time today, but we're going to continue this because we do want to go back and talk about history of the Jews, the land, the borders, 48, 67, 73, a little bit more. But John, I want to go back to how in the world was there little accountability with the Obama administration giving money to Iran? We know that now there's a legacy that Obama had. He cozied up to Iran. He steeped himself in anti-American ideas. They used his presidency to destabilize the Middle East. And it just seems like anti-Semitism has increased greatly since the Obama years. And, you know, his hostility toward American exceptionalism might play into this. I want to get your thoughts on that. Before we can, I know we can do another whole show on that, right?
The first foreign policy visit of Barack Obama, the first foreign visits were to Turkey and Egypt in the Middle East. And he gave a very famous speech. I would recommend people go to look at it. June 4th, 2009 at Al Jazeera University in Cairo, in which he talked about his love of Islam, the Holy Book of Islam. He was raised in part of his life in Indonesia. His father was at least one of the people who purport to be his father. I think his father really was Frank Marshall Davis, a radical communist. But his mother was married to an Islamic guy, and she took him to Indonesia, and he talked about hearing the wonderful call to prayer every morning, 5 times a day. And listen, I've heard this call to prayer, and it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me because I know the truth of the religion behind it. So Obama did, during his administration, release somewhere around $150 billion to the Iranian government, $1 billion, including pallets of cash that totaled somewhere around $6 to $10 billion in cash. And for example, the money that was unfrozen recently to get the hostages released, the restriction on that is, you can't use this for anything except humanitarian aid, which is, even Tony Blinken came out recently and said, we know that they're not going to use it just for humanitarian purposes. By the way, 10 days ago, Jake Sullivan, I don't know what title is, these people between the I call it the first, second, and third Obama administrations, and then they refer to this one as the Biden administration for obvious reasons. Jake Sullivan has moved in the national security apparatus among all 3 of those administrations. He may be national security advisor. He did an interview at The Atlantic, you can find it on the internet, about maybe 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, in which he said, yes, it's wonderful that the Middle East is more peaceful today than it has been in 20 years.
Oh my goodness.
I have the quote. I think I played it last week in my update. If not, I will play it in an upcoming update because I think it's a very important quote. And it's on a red background, which makes it even more dramatic. So that happened. It is very interesting. This 3 weeks ago today, just 3 weeks ago today, everybody was talking about peace in the Middle East. There were extensive discussions between, we know 3 years ago, by the way, President Trump administration under Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, his special advisor Jared Kushner, and David Friedman, the ambassador to Israel, had entered into with at least 3 Arab countries what is known as the Abraham Accords. That is because of the common heritage. The Arabs trace their their lineage back to Abraham through Ishmael. The Jews in Israel trace their background through Jacob to Abraham. So that sort of sets the stage. But Netanyahu went 2 days, 3 days after the president of Iran had gone and spoke at the UN, where he held up the Quran and kissed it about this wonderful holy book that's being desecrated around the world in protest. A man who is known quite well throughout the world as the Butcher of Tehran because of his ruthless style. He came into office a couple of years ago. He talked about, so Netanyahu, when he held up a map from India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Eastern Mediterranean to Europe. And he said, my friends, we are on the verge of a new Middle East in the world where peace will reign, peace and economic prosperity will reign. I'm paraphrasing. You can get the speech. I played it in my update. And he took an arrow because a few days before, the week before at the G20 conference, the president of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, Joe Biden, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had gone to India with Modi, and they announced the Middle East, India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. And they're going to be railway, sea passage to Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, railway through Jordan and Israel to the Mediterranean, and then ship. And it's going to be pipelines. It's going to be electricity pipelines and power grids and all this other stuff. This is a new era. And Netanyahu said we are on the edge of a new Middle East. Peace and prosperity will reign. He drew a red line from India through Saudi Arabia, through Israel, all the way to Europe. He said this is a new era, and we are on the verge of peace with Saudi Arabia. So there were a lot of discussions going on with peace with Saudi Arabia, which is a very big deal because Saudi Arabia is the home of Islam. The Crown Prince has been pushing this. He is a reformer in many respects. I personally don't think there's going to be anything final with Israel until this current situation is resolved. And I'll explain historically, either in this program or the next, why this is kind of significant. Because his father had pushed a thing. His father is the king. It's a tribal culture. There's very much respect shown to the fathers, the elders. And so Mohammed bin Salman had taken up the mantle of his several brothers. All of the kings of Saudi Arabia since King Saud have been the direct progeny of the first king of Saudi Arabia, who reigned from 1933 to 1952, Ibn Saud. And it was during this time that oil was found in Saudi Arabia. And today, the Saudi family, consisting of, Ibn Saud had, I think, 60 sons, somewhere in that range. All of his sons, most from his favorite wife, have been the kings. Mohammed bin Salman, who is the son of King Salman. Mohammed bin Salman means son of Salman. King Salman is in his late 80s. I think he was born in 1936. His brothers, though, had started a thing after 9/11. There was this push to get peace in the Middle East and to get this situation resolved between Israel and the Palestinians. It was called the Saudi Peace Initiative, the Arab Peace Initiative. And that's kind of rearing its heads. But so that's King Salman's baby. Mohammed bin Salman wants his own legacy. And by the way, the Saudi family, I don't know if I mentioned this, they discovered oil early in the reign of the first king, King Saud. The Saudi family is now the wealthiest family on the planet. Their net worth is probably in the range of $1.5 trillion. So that would be 7 or 8 times the net worth of, say, Elon Musk.
Wow.
Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is 38, and he has a fortune somewhere in the range of $25 billion, probably more.
Jeez.
So I think things are going to change, but it was 3 weeks ago today that Benjamin Netanyahu stood behind the podium at the United Nations General Assembly fall meeting in New York City and said, we are entering a new Middle East.
Wow.
Now, that did not age very well, given what's happened in the last week.
No. Well, John.
So this is incredibly significant time. Listen, I said to somebody, we live in biblical times.
Yeah, prophetic times. And by the way, we need to wrap this up so we can just get people to our Monday show, because we're going to continue with John Haller. In, I believe, is it 2 Thessalonians, where it's a warning saying, when people are going around saying peace and safety, look out.
Sudden destruction comes.
Yep. Sudden destruction comes. Obama, in a speech, said, we are living in the most peaceful times in modern history during his administration, world history. And there was no peace in the world at that time during his administration. So I don't know what his reason for saying that. I guess he's, trying to call things that are not as though they were. But John, we've got
President Obama, if I might interject, was the most self-aware human being I think I have ever seen in my life.
What do you mean?
Self-aware. He knew all about himself. He had an ego unmatched like anyone I've ever seen in public life.
Yep. I agree.
And he sort of orchestrated things against Israel in the period of time where he was a lame duck president after the election, before Trump took office in late 2020, which was clearly anti-Israel the first time in U.S. history. Look up UN Resolution 2334.
That at the end of the Obama administration?
Yeah, that happened right around Christmas Day of 2020.
Wow.
It was to undermine the Trump administration. I'm sorry, 2016. I apologize.
2016. Okay. Well, we've got a lot to continue with, John, with you. We appreciate. By the way, if you've got some time over the weekend, friends, watch the video on John's Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel with One America News. It's only 9 minutes or so. It's called War in Israel, a Fulfillment of Bible Prophecy, with a question mark. It's on the program In Focus. So John, I watched that. I shared that on my social media, but I'm pretty censored. But at least a few people saw it. But when we do the show on Monday, continuing with you, John, we're going to go back and talk about the land, the history, biblically, and then what's happened with the borders, people's perception, the propaganda. We'll talk from 1948 to 67 to 73. And then we'll get into modern history and what's going on now, and how the church has been so misinformed and confused on this, because there's some Christians that don't support Israel, and it's a head scratcher, but we'll get into that with everything else on Monday. Brother, thank you for all the research you do. You can get John's prophecy updates. He'll do a new one this Sunday. God bless you, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
All right, we'll continue that with John on Monday. Wow, this is just, these are prophetic times. These are fascinating times. They are potentially overwhelming. I just want to remind you that Romans 12:2 says, don't conform to the world ways, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:21 says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. God is on the throne. He's fully aware of what's going on, and we need to trust him. It's a day at a time, and he is sovereign over all things, even what's happening with Israel and the Middle East. So to be continued on Monday with John Haller. Thanks for supporting the show with your donations. Thank you for sharing, and those of you that have subscribed, we appreciate it. We're growing little by little. So God bless you, and as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter.